It's the 1940s, and the world is occupied in the heat of World War II. Through everything that has happened, the United States has been able to avoid entering another devastating war for quite some time. But on December 7th, 1941, this would all change. This day will go down in infamy as the day the Japanese attacked the American naval base at Pearl Harbor. The events that followed led to the United States joining the war and achieving victory in Europe and the Pacific. After studying the events that transpired in class and after doing some research, the entire situation with the Pacific Theater reminded me of something. Clash Royale is a player versus player battle game, where each player has 3 towers, 2 Princess Towers and 1 King Tower. In order to win a game of Clash Royale, a player must destroy the most amount of towers in the allotted time. However, if the King Tower is destroyed, the game ends immediately. In order to attack and defend yourself, each player has 8 different cards, which can be either troops, buildings, or spells, each with a cost and elixir associated with them. Elixir is the currency you use in-game. It rises automatically on its own as the game progresses. With that basic overview of the game out of the way, let's get on with the topic. As I mentioned before, each player has a deck of 8 cards they must use to win the game. The deck I'm about to show you is the deck I think is the most suited for the American Army composition at the time. The Knight is representative of an infantry division. The job of an infantry division is basically to hold the line, so that artillery in the back can do heavy damage to the foe. Okay, I think that the Knight does this well, with its high amount of health and cheap cost, which is 3 elixir. To represent the aforementioned artillery, I think the Firecracker is a good choice. This troop has a lot of range and deals good splash damage with each attack. However, this troop can easily be taken out if caught unguarded. The Heal Spirit is my choice for the United States Medical Corps. There are 2 healing units in the game, Heal Spirit and Battle Healer. After a bit of thinking, I decided to choose the Heal Spirit. The reason why is because the Medical Corps did not actively participate in combat, unlike the Battle Healer. Although the Heal Spirit does a small amount of damage when it activates, it's very small, and I overall think it's the better choice here. For the Air Force, I have 2 cards to add here. The first is the Balloon. The role of the balloon in the game is to drop bombs on enemy towers and buildings. An important property to note here is the balloon's AI. This troop does not target enemy troops, only towers and buildings. Just like in real life, the balloon is not optimized for air-to-air combat. Bombers in real life mostly performed air raids on enemy fortresses or camps, or cities, not mobile divisions. To represent American naval bases or encampments, I will use the Goblin Hut. The reason being is it is a building, which means it would be a target for enemy troops, and from the building it spawns Spear Goblins, which are a troop so that you can easily deploy into action. The next card represents a special type of unit, the Paratrooper. The Skeleton Barrel represents this kind of unit the best, due to it literally dropping units into battle. If undefended, both Paratroopers and the Skeleton Barrel can be devastating if they get behind enemy lines. For the final 2 cards, I chose Rocket and Mirror. Anyone who knows anything about World War II knows why I chose Rocket. For anyone who doesn't, the Rocket represents nuclear bombs dropped on Japan at the end of the war. The Mirror, which will be used for the second nuke, also has the purpose of representing the recover speed of the US Pacific Fleet after the attacks at Pearl Harbor. The Mirror allows the player using it to play the card they last played again, which I think fits that theme quite well. With all this talk about the American deck, it's requisite we talk about the deck of the Japanese. Both the United States and Japan employed modern armies during the time of the war. The two had very different fighting styles, strengths, and weaknesses, which will be shown in the deck. The first card I'll be using is the Miner. Although the Miner doesn't look like it, the role it plays is a perfect all-around description of Japanese military strategy. The Miner can be quickly deployed into enemy territory and will almost always get in some damage, but in the process sacrifices attack potency. Just like when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, they left the ship repair centers in relatively good condition. The next troop is a member of the Japanese Air Force, the Baby Dragon. The Baby Dragon represents the Japanese bomber plan. The Baby Dragon has a close-range splash attack, like a bomb. The reason I chose Baby Dragon and not Balloon for Japan is because the United States had more effective kinds of bombers. The next pick might be a little controversial. I decided to choose Fire Spirit to represent kamikaze units. Before I move on, I want to address the fact that kamikaze soldiers were only used on the defensive. The Japanese army felt there was no other way to win. If you think about it, using it on offense would be a needless waste of life. Just like the kamikaze soldier, the Fire Spirit is only useful on defense. And yes, it does kill itself when it attacks. The next card is the Flying Machine. This troop is meant to represent Japanese fighter pilots. These types of aircraft were typically armed with rapid-fire machine guns. Although Clash has no such machine guns, the flying machine comes decently close with its bullet. To represent the Japanese infantry, I used Royal Recruits. Royal Recruits are an interesting card because it spawns 7 basic units in a line, spanning from one side of the arena to the other. The reason I chose this for Japan's infantry is because of the Japanese willingness to fight. The Japanese at the time felt there was nothing more honorable than dying for your country. This in turn would allow for the military to be filled up in droves and allow units such as the Royal Recruits to come to be. The next troop I included is the Skeletons. Skeletons are the most basic unit in the game, as well as the cheapest. This is a reference to the willingness to defend Japanese territory. As I said, the Japanese were willing to do anything if it meant their country could win the war. It was once said by a senior US officer in the Pacific Theater that there are no civilians in Japan. The point I'm trying to make here is that Japanese civilians would fight alongside their military in order to fend off invasion. As the weakest unit in the game, the Skeletons fit the role. The next card won't take as long to describe. This card is the Fireball. It represents Japan's bombardment ability as has been demonstrated in the numerous battles they fought. And the final card in this deck is the Battle Ram, which harkens back to my first point with the Miner about Japanese victories in the Pacific being based on speed. Okay, I've rambled long enough. Just sit back and enjoy the fight. With a 3-crown victory against the Japanese, Japan would be placed under US occupation. American influence, ideals, and economic policy were being brought to Japan as the United States rebuilt the country. This would lead to political instability in the early years, but eventually lead to economic prosperity we see today. I hope everyone watching enjoyed the absolute chaos that was this video. I hope whoever's watching this has a good day. Adios.